Today we're getting into the mind of a man who looked at the absolute chaos of a battlefield and saw something totally different. He didn't see a problem to fix, he saw a new reality to master. This is the guy who basically invented modern strategy, and his ideas weren't cooked up in some quiet library. Nope, they were forged in humiliating defeat and personal exile. We're talking about Karl von Clausewitz and the code he built for a world where your perfect plans are gonna fail, every single time.
And this, right here, is the heart of it all. See, while everyone else was desperately trying to find some perfect geometric formula for winning, Clausewitz knew it was a fantasy. He got that real power isn't about avoiding the messiness of reality. It's about having the mental toughness to dive right into it. He realized the only way to win was to develop the psychological clarity to stare into the chaos, find a hidden path, and actually use uncertainty as a weapon.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick off with the one battlefield moment that completely shattered his worldview. Then we'll see how being a lifelong outsider gave him this unique, sovereign way of seeing things. We're going to break down his core ideas on friction and chaos, and then turn that into a real system you can use. We'll look at his massive legacy, and then, most importantly, we'll figure out how you can apply this powerful code to your own life. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's go back in time. We start on a battlefield. The year is 1806. For a young Prussian officer named Karl von Clausewitz, this isn't just another fight. This is the day his entire world breaks apart. And it's right here, in the ashes of a total disaster, that a new way of thinking is born.
I mean, just try to imagine the shock. The Prussian army was the gold standard in Europe. They were all about rigid discipline, flawless clockwork maneuvers. They thought they were invincible. But when they came up against Napoleon's dynamic, chaotic, and frankly brilliant forces, that perfect machine wasn't just beaten. It was annihilated. This was way more than a military loss. It was a deep intellectual humiliation that proved their entire system was a lie. For Clausewitz, who saw this whole disaster unfold as a prisoner of war, this moment was a complete philosophical breakdown. He realized that all the textbooks, all the drills, all those elegant battle plans, they were just fantasy. They completely failed to account for the one thing that's always there in the real world, a force he would later call friction. You know, that huge, unavoidable gap between the plan on paper and the reality on the ground? This lit a fire in him to understand this force, not as some small problem, but as the absolute center of all strategy.
And right there, that's the birth of what we're calling the Clausewitz Code. And look, it's not a set of tactics, it's not a checklist, it's a mindset. It's this deep belief that your ultimate weapon isn't a bigger army or a fancier plan, but a mind that stays clear, calm, and adaptable right in the middle of chaos. It's the ability to see the cold, hard truth of a situation when everyone else is blinded by fear or by hope. And that is a weapon nobody can take from you.
So, where did this crazy idea of psychological clarity even come from? Well, it wasn't something he learned in a classroom. It was forged by a life spent pushing against the system. See, Clausewitz was always an outsider, and in the end, that was his greatest strength.
He started his military career at 12 years old. 12! A lance corporal. Just let that sink in. While other kids were, being kids, he was learning the rules of a world run by entitled aristocrats. His own dad actually had to fake a noble title just to get his sons into the army. So right from the start, Clausewitz learned a really important lesson, that titles and authority often hide deep, deep incompetence and a real fear of reality.
This slide just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you have the old Prussian guard, totally rigid, obsessed with perfect lines, and demanding blind loyalty. They were terrified of anything new. Then, on the other side, you've got Napoleon's world, which was everything the Prussians were not. Chaotic, fluid, driven by pure willpower, and always looking for opportunity inside the chaos. Clausewitz saw the future, and he knew the old way was a dead end.
You can see his whole journey right here, this path away from dogma. First as a kid, he's stuck in that rigid system. Then at Jena, he sees it fail spectacularly. And then comes the biggest move of his life. In 1812, Prussia is forced to ally with France, and Clausewitz makes a shocking choice. He quits, travels to Russia, and joins their army to keep fighting Napoleon. His friends called it treason, but really, it was his ultimate act of intellectual freedom.
For him, this wasn't about betraying Prussia. It was about escaping a system that was intellectually bankrupt, a system that refused to see the world as it actually was. He saw blind loyalty not as a strength, but as a dangerous disease that was destroying his home. He had to go where he could fight for a deeper truth about war itself, even if it meant getting called a traitor by the same people he was trying to save.
And it was in that isolation, serving with the Russian army during that brutal 1812 campaign, that he found his true power. Stripped of his rank, his country, his social status, he had to rely only on what he could see with his own two eyes and figure out with his own brain. He basically unlearned the need for anyone else's approval and discovered that in the fog of total chaos, the only compass you can trust is your own clear, unflinching will. He developed what we can call sovereign realism, a radical reliance on yourself. So out of that isolation and rebellion, this incredibly powerful philosophy starts to emerge. He didn't just survive chaos and friction. He built his entire way of thinking around them. He saw them not as enemies, but as the very fabric of reality itself.
Okay, let's really dig into this definition, because friction is everything to his philosophy. It's not just a minor problem, it's the fundamental state of the world. Think of it like the combined weight of 1,000 tiny issues. A soldier's boot breaks, an order gets misunderstood, a sudden rainstorm turns a road into a swamp, the fear in a general's stomach. It's everything that can and will go wrong. Most people try to make plans that get rid of friction. Clausewitz said that's impossible. You have to accept friction as the very air you breathe.
A huge part of friction is what he famously called the fog of war. This is that cloud of uncertainty that surrounds every decision maker. You never have all the facts. Your intel might be old or just wrong. Your opponent does something you never saw coming. But here's the thing, where other people saw a wall, a reason to freeze up, Clausewitz saw an opening. For him, the fog was the perfect environment for true genius, that rare mix of smarts and courage to cut through the noise and find a clarity that nobody else could.
This simple phrase was a totally revolutionary idea at the time. The old generals believed that if a plan failed, it was because something unexpected messed up their perfect design. Clausewitz just completely flipped that on its head. He argued that the unexpected stuff is the design. Friction isn't the exception, it's the rule. It's the one constant. So any good plan has to start with that assumption. You don't plan for things to go right, you plan for resilience when things inevitably go wrong.
So if everything is just chaos and friction, how in the world do you actually win? Well, you do it by finding what he called the center of gravity. This is such a brilliant idea. It's not always the biggest army. It could be the enemy's political leadership, a key alliance, their economy, or even just the will of their people. It's the one source of power that if you can hit it, the whole enemy structure just crumbles. And here's the catch. You can't find it by looking at a map in a comfy office. You have to be in the mess, looking through the fog to actually see it.
And you gotta understand, this was never just theory for him. When he finally got back to Prussia and became the head of the war college, he didn't run it like a school where you just memorized old rules. He turned it into a laboratory, a place for tough debates, for war games, for stress testing every single assumption, a place for systematically finding the raw, unvarnished truth about conflict, no matter how messy that truth was.
Okay, so Clausewitz has this powerful philosophy about embracing reality. But how did he actually make it a part of his daily life? He developed a set of mental models, real intellectual habits, to systematically cut through the chaos he knew was coming.
At the core of his system is this amazing framework, the Trinity. He argued that war is never just one thing. It's this dynamic, constantly shifting dance between three forces. First, you have the raw passion and violence, which comes from the will of the people. Second, you've got the play of chance and probability. That's the army's domain. And third, you have rational policy and reason, the goal set by the government. A truly great leader has to constantly balance all three. If you ignore any of them, you're doomed.
This brings us to a really practical question, one he was asking himself all the time. It's not enough to make a good plan. You have to go looking for its weak spots before the world does it for you. You have to audit it for friction. So think about your own work, your big projects. How can you apply this kind of tough, realistic thinking?
Here's how he did it, and how we can too. A friction audit means you deliberately look at all the messy human stuff. Fear, morale, ego, just plain bad luck. You actively look for the gap between your beautiful spreadsheet and the messy world it's about to hit. You ruthlessly stress test your assumptions. Ask yourself, what has to be true for this to work, and what if it's not? The goal isn't a perfect plan. That's impossible. The goal is a resilient plan that can bend without breaking.
This whole audit practice is part of a bigger habit we can call radical realism. This was his secret weapon. While other people were chasing the latest trend or clinging to old traditions, Clausewitz had a routine of just cutting through all the noise. He would mentally tear every situation down to its absolute foundational truths. what is really going on here once you strip away all the hype, all the wishful thinking, and all the fear.
And this is maybe his most famous idea, and it's the ultimate tool of radical realism. He refused to see war as some special, separate event. He connected every single military action back to a rational purpose. War, he said, is just a tool of policy. It's just politics, but with violence. If you ever forget why you're fighting, the political goal you're trying to achieve, then the violence just becomes a pointless, destructive mess. Every action has to serve that clear, rational goal.
Now, the result of this life's work wasn't just his masterpiece of a book on war. It was a complete and total revolution in how the entire world thinks about strategy, about power, and about conflict itself.
Just think about that journey for a second. The guy who was called a traitor, a nomadic exile scribbling notes in quiet rooms, he became the foundational thinker for the modern world. His work became required reading not just for generals, but for presidents, for CEOs, for diplomats. By tying violence to a rational purpose, he basically gave conflict a moral conscience. He forced leaders to ask not just can we win, but what's the point of this fight?
And this really shows his impact. He completely reframed things we see as negative, like chaos or failure. Suddenly, a retreat wasn't just a loss. It could be a genius strategic move, a way to lure an enemy in, to trade space for time, to regroup. Chaos wasn't just something you had to get through. It was an environment packed with opportunities for the smarter, calmer, more adaptable player.
If there is one core piece of his legacy, it is this. He absolutely destroyed the seductive and frankly dangerous myth that there's a simple formula for success. He taught generations of leaders to stop looking for easy answers and seven-step plans. Instead, he forced them to focus on what actually matters, a clear-eyed view of reality, radical adaptability, and above all, the power of a focused, unwavering will.
Because the lessons from this Prussian general who died almost 200 years ago, they aren't just stuck in history books about war. They're a timeless, powerful guide for any of us trying to deal with the friction and the uncertainty of our own complicated lives.
All right, let's bring this all home. This is the really crucial part. How can you use the Clausewitz Code right now, today? This is about taking his huge philosophy and making it your personal practice.
And I want you to really think about this for a second. Where's the fog in your life right now? What's that complex project, that difficult relationship, that uncertain career move that you've been kind of avoiding because it just seems too messy, too unpredictable, too full of friction? Name it. That's your battlefield. And that is your opportunity.
His entire life is a masterclass in taking control. He teaches us to stop being passive victims of our circumstances, just waiting for the fog to magically clear. Because guess what? It never does. The real challenge and the real opportunity is to start moving inside that fog, to treat the chaos not as a wall, but as raw material that a clear mind and a strong will can shape into a breakthrough.
So here's what you can do this week, a simple 3-step plan based on his work. First, pick that one important thing you've labeled too messy or too complicated. Second, this week, make a conscious choice to lean into it. Don't run from the friction. Study it. Ask the hard questions. And third, commit. Stay in that mess with total focus until you find that hidden center of gravity, that one key insight, that one critical action that creates an opening where there wasn't one before.
And this is the ultimate reward. When you practice this kind of radical realism, you take back your personal agency. You stop feeling like you're just getting knocked around by entropy, that natural tendency for things to fall apart. Instead, you start becoming the architect of the outcome, because you understand the real forces at play, not just the ones you wish were there. You master the situation by first mastering your own view of it.
So let's end on this powerful idea. Don't be afraid of the complexity. Don't run from the chaos. The answers you're looking for, the breakthroughs you need, they're not in some neat and tidy plan. They're never there. The truth is always, always in the mess. And your ability to navigate that mess with clarity, with realism, and with sheer determination, your will, that is the code for your greatness.